at the start of this new year. I'm especially looking forward to this session because it's going to be very hands-on, which is what I feel like we need to get all of our brains moving in the right direction for the start of the new year. And we've been able to assemble a number of kind of diverse experts from across multiple fields to really dig in on two of the studio impact projects. And so the format of today is I'm going to give just a very brief kind of introduction and give one perspective on evidence for us to think about as a framework. And then I'm going to allow our panelists, the experts we've come in to match with the specific projects, to give a brief introduction to themselves and their experience using evidence in the evaluation of programs or in implementation science. And then we're going to spend some time with two really exciting projects. So with Give Us the Floor and Experience Craft, where they're going to have a chance to describe where they are in their process of collecting evidence to evaluate their work. And we'll do a breakout session after that where we'll have a chance to really dig in and help maybe design the innovative next step or to troubleshoot some of the issues that they're dealing with on the ground. So with that, I'm just going to share a couple of slides to get us started, and then I'm going to introduce by name each one of the panelists and have them give a brief intro. Okay, can you all see my screens? Is that working for you? Yes, I can screen share in 2024. This is great. So why am I the person talking? Well, one, I like Mimi, so whenever she asks me to do something, I say yes. And so here I am talking about evidence. But we've also had the good fortune to be building an international network called Series over the last 2.5 years. And we were approached by funders in the education development space who were frustrated by a number of programs out there in the field who people thought were probably good programs, were probably doing reaching their intended impact, but we didn't know because we didn't actually have the evidence or a way to evaluate whether it had any impacts, immediate or lasting, on young people. So they approached us and wanting to do this in the ed tech space, but the same principles apply to a lot of disciplines you're working in right now. So we assembled a group of scholars from across multiple fields: computer science, psychology, education, and brought them together to do 3 things. And the 3 main things we've tried to do through the network so far, and hopefully we can connect to each of you today on one of these 3 points, is first to advance the science. And that's really the science of understanding how these interventions, mostly delivered on digital platforms, impact children's health and development, and to do that in ways that are truly interdisciplinary. As young people spend more and more of their time online, psychologists are lost when we can't understand, what computer scientists know, and maybe vice versa. The other goal, and I'm excited to see Krithika on the call, was training the next generation of scholars. So we have a relatively large training program. I think Anna-Mara Ritt-Olsen might be here also, who leads that. And that's bringing together young trainees, graduate students, and postdocs to train and to be embedded in some of the companies and NGOs that we work with, and then to build these industry to research partnerships. And a core idea around this, and I hope that this comes through in our conversation today, is this is where it gets messy, right? When we the rubber hits the road and we try to evaluate whether things work in the real world. So I'm trained as a quantitative psychologist. Things are very neat and tidy. When we analyze data from RCTs, even, kind of in the ideal scenario, but we all know as program developers who do things in the world and try and evaluate that this is the really messy part. And so I wanted to say that I've been humbled by the experience of trying to do things in the real world and have the utmost respect for those of you who are out there grinding, building things that kids actually use, right? Producing the types of evidence, I'm looking at Ashley here, that parents and teachers and administrators want, and putting up with academics that, as Mimi says, have like Candace level of evidence, right? So I want to pause and say that, what do we mean when we say evidence, right? And that can be varied, and it's going to be varied by discipline. I'm gonna put up 2 examples of what different institutions or disciplines have defined as hierarchies of evidence or as categories of evidence. The reason I'm showing these examples is not because I'm advocating one of them, but I think it's a helpful exercise when we start in interdisciplinary collaborations to identify kind of what stage we're actually working in, right? So are we in a stage that is very initial level basic research or tinkering, as the HCI folks call it? Are we in this initial testing phase? Are we kind of moving? And where do we want to go? Where do we need to go based on maybe funding goals, the ability to have impact and scale, right? And where could we reasonably go with the constraints we have here? I think a lot of the problems in the evidence conversation come from kind of talking around each other and believing that there's one gold standard of evidence, which there is not. And so I know Stephen Schuler is in the room, who's a big fan of NIH and the American Academy of Pediatrics. I'll put one example. This is an evidence pyramid that is developed, pulled from the medical research. So if you want a really rigid hierarchical view of evidence base, there are plenty of them. People fight about this all the time. But it's a useful exercise to think about, like, where do I fit in this hierarchy or in this cluster of evidence, and to think about where the audience, maybe the funder or the person you're trying to reach, the foundation, what type of structure or template they've adopted for evaluating evidence. So having that initial kind of level setting conversation can be really useful to situate yourself where you are and where you want to go. Here's another one from NIH. This is from the National Institute for Aging. This is a little bit more helpful. It's not so rigid in terms of hierarchy, but we think about this kind of basic level of research, and this will change by discipline to moving up towards intervention, generation, refinement, and then up to efficacy, effectiveness, dissemination, and scale. Now, of course, people fight about this all the time. I'm not advocating one or the other, but I think just understanding, articulating for your field what kind of hierarchies or categories or frameworks for understanding evidence, where do you situate your own work in this right now, and where do you want to be in the future? And do we have maybe some of the people in the room can help us take those to the next steps? The last point I wanted to make was there are incredible working projects ongoing around the world, some of which are not evaluated at all, and there are some examples of people that are trying to do both the important work on the ground and ensure that as those programs are rolled out, that anything that is not effective or that they test as being not effective can be refined. And War Child Holland is one of the groups that Ceres works with. And the thing that's been very helpful in working with this group, I'll say just as an example, is some of the projects that we've started with them are very pilot phase. They've had maybe RCT level evidence from other contexts, but having a very open conversation that we don't know what it looks like on a digital platform. We don't know what it's going to look like in this context. So we're all comfortable going back to that level 0, for example, or that we maybe we're further along in that process. So as an initial conversation, that's been really helpful to us. But just as a framing exercise, I think the part of the values that we're aligned with here and that we've been aligned with in Ceres for a long time is that often in research with children, evidence becomes a secondary consideration because everyone is so passionate, and rightly so, to improve the lives and the futures of young people. And sometimes we forget that evaluation and implementation science, I'm not sure why that's happening. I am in a stop screen machine. Sometimes we forget that when we're working within these contexts, that the ethical thing to do is to ensure that children have the best evidence that we can give to them. So that's a unifying goal here. So those are my framing content, or comments. So with that, I want to pause and I want to introduce our panelists that have joined us today. Each one of them brings in unique expertise with respect to the evaluation of programs and interventions. And so if you could just take a minute, introduce yourself and introduce what types of projects that you've or approaches you've taken in the evaluation of evidence. And I'll cut everyone off we'll give each person about 90 seconds to keep us all on task. I'm going to start with Jessie Borelli, and I'm also going to give a plug that her new book was just released this week, I think, that everyone should should buy. I'll put it in the chat later in the session. So Jesse, please.
Oh, nice, Candace. Thank you. Um, so I don't know what that image is.
I don't know.
It's not connected to me. But so hi, my name is Jessie Borelli. I'm a clinical and a developmental psychologist at UC Irvine. And I I probably for the purposes of this talk, I'll talk mostly about my community-based engaged work, which um I really just started about like 6 or 7 years ago in earnest, although I've been trying to do it for longer. And I like Candace said, I would say it's been a truly humbling experience. It's probably taught me more about research than any other experience before that. And it's been, yeah, yeah, I'll say that most of my community engaged work has been in the context of working with an organization called Latino Health Access, which is a community health agency that is promotora led, which like trained community health workers, and has been working with them in the context of co-developing an intervention, a family resilience program, and working with them to then deliver that intervention to the community. And then more recently, actually developing an intervention for promotores and community health workers and delivering an intervention to them. And that has been in the context of other community health organizations, primarily serving low-income Latino families as well. And I'm happy to talk more. I'm aware that I'm going to get cut off soon, but just about all the many, many things I've learned and many ways I've been humbled. And I'm excited to be here. Thanks.
Thanks, Jesse. Well, we've assigned you to breakout group just based on your tremendous expertise across a wide range, including clinical. So Jesse's a brilliant clinical psychologist also. Anthony.
Hi, so my name is Anthony. I'm a postdoc here at UC Irvine and affiliated with CIRS, as Candace just described. A recent PhD graduate from University of Wisconsin-Madison. And my prior research interest mainly involved around the process and outcomes of social media use among adolescents, and especially LGBTQ adolescents. Particularly interested in studying and investigating why certain individuals with different personality traits and developmental tasks will prefer the digital space for interpersonal relationships, and especially how they seek out support and seek out help from others. I'm also interested in study how, to what extent digital space provide social media or digital media provided the space for adolescents to navigate their identity, especially LGBTQ adolescents and the community. So yeah, I'm very excited to be here and share my research and interests in this area. Thank you.
Thanks, Anthony. Kelly Dickerson, who I will give credit to also assembling and matchmaking for this panel. So thank you.
Of course. Hi, everyone. I'm Kelly Dickerson. I am a developmental psychologist and the director of research for Series, working with Candace. My research has largely centered on testing methods of promoting health and well-being, particularly in underserved populations, such as those involved in the foster care system. And I'm really increasingly interested and focused on digital technology as a vehicle for doing so. I have experience in evaluating interventions and programs focused on different aspects of youth health and well-being, including learning as well, especially in young people, and both kind of a researcher and consulting role. I'm really excited to be here and look forward to learning more about the projects.
That's great. And Ashley from Instructure, welcome.
Hi, everyone. Excited to be here today. My name is Ashley Hunt. I'm a senior researcher with Learn Platform by Instructure. And the work that we do here is primarily working with ed tech providers and helping them to build evidence. The framework we use is generally the ESSA Every Student Succeeds Act tiers of evidence. So a lot of our work is focused around that. My background is actually in developmental psychology, and I did my doctorate in educational psychology, focused primarily on social emotional learning. And so I manage mostly the social social and emotional learning ed tech products that we're evaluating for providers. And so I'm increasingly interested in the potential and also the challenges of designing and evaluating ed tech tools that are designed for social and emotional learning. So I'm excited to hear what this group's been working on.
That's great. And Chelsea.
Hi, everyone. My name is Chelsea Olson, and I'm a research scientist at the University of Wisconsin-Madison in the Department of Pediatrics on a team called SMART, which stands for Social Media and Adolescent Health Research Team. And I have my PhD in educational psychology from UW-Madison as well. And so my experiences with evidence and research have largely been through academia. And very broadly, our team has researched how experiences on social media are associated with health topics, including mental and physical health. And I focused work on both positive experiences, so information seeking, and negative experiences like cyberbullying and cyberstalking on social media and how those are associated with mental health. And then we've used both quantitative approaches like cross-sectional and longitudinal studies via surveys, and also qualitative approaches, content analyses, focus groups, interviews. And so, yeah, I'm excited to be here. Thanks.
That's great. And everyone was so great at keeping to time. I'm going to actually call out Stephen Schuler, who's an implementation science evaluation guru, just to give us a brief intro also.
Hi, folks. I'm Stephen Schuler. I'm a faculty here at UC Irvine, like many other folks in the Department of Psychological Science. I'm a clinical psychologist and a mental health services researcher, and really try to do a lot of work on using technology to improve access to and accessibility of mental health services.
All right, welcome everyone. I feel like I just want to take this group and all the rest of you and like just launch a project with all the expertise in the room. So thank you. A lot of brain power here. So the format we're going to go through, we're going to give, we've selected two projects, two projects that were selected for being promising and potential for impact through the studio, but that we thought we were ideally situated to bring in some additional expertise that could be helpful in allowing them to problem solve additional things or things that they're working on right now, and take their research or evidence-based evaluations to whatever step they would like to go to next. And so the next 10 to 20 minutes, we're going to do 10-minute per project and have the projects give a brief description of kind of where they are in their evidence base, what things that they're currently working on or struggling with. And then we're going to allow you all the choice to kind of go into breakout rooms and do a little bit of problem solving for each of those projects. So first we want to learn about the projects, and then we want to roll up our sleeves and see if we can be helpful as a community to advancing them to the next stage that they want to be at. And so I have the pleasure of introducing Valerie and give us the floor. I met with Valerie and Catherine, I guess a couple of months ago now. I was just blown away by the community you've been able to build with Give Us the Floor and the many, many goals you have for your platform and your future work. And so Valerie, can you tell us a little bit about Give Us the Floor, what you've done, where you are, and where you want to be in terms of your evidence journey? Oh, and of course, you're on mute, Valerie, because it's the start of the, yes, of course, that's happening.
Of course.
Right.
So I was saying thank you very much for your kind words and for inviting Give Us the Floor to this workshop. So a little bit on Give Us the Floor, we help LGBTQ young people, teenager in distress via online supportive group chats. So they are hosted on our app. There are groups of 12 to 15 of them. One or two of them are trained to be facilitators, and the program is, so we have over 12,000 of them since we launched, which was in April 2018, with a big growth, like it's growing more and more. So our big problem about evaluation, so we've been doing self-report surveys. So we send the participant survey when they join, 1 month after, 3 months after, 6 months after, 1 year, and when they leave. But the survey are anonymous because typically because of what they deal with, we know that the surveys are not anonymous. most of them will be afraid to share with us what they're really going through. And the whole principle, I mean, as you know, the LGBTQ community is very targeted and can be very dangerous to be seen as belonging to the LGBTQ community, and so especially for young people. So that has been our challenge, I would say our main challenge. Though we worked in the past 2 months with Chelsea, who helped a lot reworking our surveys to try to bring a bit more kind of evidence or question, reformulating the question so we can better show evidence to our funders. But it's hard for us. We would love to have something that goes beyond the self-report. And at the same time, we can't really track our participants because the whole app is based on anonymity, safety, no judgment. So that's really the challenge we have, because we are innovative. We find that a lot of founders are afraid of what we do because they're afraid of the risk of an online program. It's new, it hasn't been really validated by any big academic or organization. And so they tend to be afraid and don't want to take the risk, even if we know that after what I have a 2003 numbers, after 1 month in the program, 83% of the participants have been helped. 84% feel less lonely, and 76% of them think they wouldn't have found this help somewhere else, or I'm not sure. And I think 83%, I don't have quite the number yet in my head, but 83% feel better about themselves. So we know that in the self-report it works, but we would need to, it would be really beneficial for us to have something that is a bit academically proof, like with the big stamp, like, yeah.
So Valerie, can I ask a follow-up question? So when you say it would be helpful, are you talking about it would be helpful internally in terms of the development or the direction of the platform, or helpful for securing additional support? So or both of those things?
Both. I would say our first goal is the funding, because with the funding we can do a lot of other stuff. But it's also to understand better how they are helped. And so we've been selected. I don't know if you guys know, it's called Delta Analytic. It's an organization of a lot of data scientists, high-level data scientists, who so we did an application, and so they're going to work, and we've been selected. So we're super happy because we would have a bunch of data scientists that will work on all the data we have, all the conversation, because we had more than 9,000 participants on the app in the past 2 years. And they're going to analyze the conversation to try to prove the benefit that the participant can get from the program. So that would be great. And so this is going to help us also adjust and adapt. We're adapting and adjusting constantly, trying to hear the feedback from the participant, but having a bit more scientific level to see what could be improved would be awesome.
That's great. We have time for a couple of questions from the floor for Valerie, if people have them. So I'm going to pause for a second. You can raise your hand. Yep, go ahead.
I have a question, but it's nice to see you, Valerie. Curious, like you talked about some of the metrics that you have around loneliness and some of the other things. I'm curious, like how your group uses those metrics for your own decision making, because I think like an important question I'm always kind of curious about with data and with some different groups is, and it goes a little bit to Candace's question, is like, what's useful for you as an organization, and then what's also useful for you in terms of relationship with other organizations, and like those evaluation questions kind of are different on each of those aspects, I think. So curious, like how you guys are currently using the data based on the questions you have.
So we use we use it mostly to see in if we're doing good or not. So when we have these numbers, we're happy. We tend to, we're not really trained to use this kind of number to go in a direction. We tend to use more the written feedback that we get from participants that say, hey, I wish we had that. I'm not happy because of that. And that's really more what we listen to at this time. One also, I would say one of the things that is also that we're trying to show and that we're looking really hard where is that when the participation drops. So we know, for example, that you have a lot of people, because they are in distress, they deal with anxiety, a lot of them deal with social anxiety, depression. It's very hard to express yourself in a group when you enter in the group and you don't know the other one. And so one of the things that we'd really like to achieve is understand, how we can help the one that are a bit more shy to be engaged and to stay longer. Because you can see that when they go in the app, in the group chat, you are the one that talk a lot right away. You are the one that say one message and then don't say anything else. And you are the one that don't say anything. And so it's like, how can we bring, it's like, so we're trying to see a pattern of when people tend to drop and how we can propose more support at this moment, if they need to, because there's also some people, I mean, the supportive group chat are not for them, it's not, they were expecting something else, and that's totally fine.
Awesome, thanks.
That's great. So it sounds like you have survey data, you have usage and engagement data, and you might have some transcript data working with now, in addition to other things that you might want to think about for rapid testing. Okay, I think this gives us a good sense. And so for those of you who were interested in give us a floor, when we go into the breakout sessions, please kind of select that option and we'll break out. For the next 10 minutes, I just want to turn this over to Matthew and Katie. I'm not sure if Katie is here as well, for Experience Craft, to give us a bit of a description of Experience Craft, where you are and what types of evidence kind of seeking and interests you have.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks so much. No, Katie couldn't join today, so I'll do my best to put on my Katie hat as well throughout this entire presentation and meeting overall. But my name is Matthew Croder. I am product director with an organization called Connected Camps. Our primary relation to the Connected Wellbeing initiative, though, is through the project that we're currently running with another nonprofit named Experience Camps called Experience Craft. So a lot of different stakeholders involved already from the get-go. At its core, Experience Craft is a combination of a Minecraft and Discord server that is meant to create a play-forward community space for children who are grieving the loss of a loved one. And so Connected Camps is really bringing this expertise in educational, sort of social emotional learning, peer mentor focused programs in game-based platforms like Minecraft. And Experience Camps is bringing sort of the expertise with working with youth who are grieving. They have typically just run in-person camps, like that's their main thing. We have exclusively run virtual camps, that's our main thing. And so Experience Craft really exists at the middle of these two nonprofits that are coming together to try to create this really amazing community space for youth who, frankly, really need places where they feel safe and supported and feel like they belong and can sort of express themselves, and especially spaces where everyone else around them sort of gets it. That's how we phrase it. Because for a lot of these kids, from what we've heard from them during our program and from them during Experience Camps programs, if you're sort of grieving the loss of a loved one, either a parent or a close friend or a family member, through traditional programming, you may just not have other peers around you who understand your experience. Or even if they kind of do, it might just feel uncomfortable or awkward in those settings. And so the goal for Experience Craft is to create a space where kids are expressing sort of heightened senses of belonging. They're sort of experiencing more agency over their grief journeys. They are increasing in the number of bids for emotional support that they're making to each other or to adults in the room, or even after the program ends, they're going and making a bid for emotional support from their family around them. They're showing an increased willingness to process and openly express their difficult feelings. These are some of the outcomes that we're hoping to see in the future. But that is sort of the 30-second description of what experience craft is. In terms of our evaluation and research, there are two primary tensions that we've sort of felt. I'm sure more will bubble up throughout the rest of this breakout and rest of this conversation. One of those primary tensions is just the balance between having the space explicitly be play forward. This is, a very intentional decision by us and by experience camps as we came together. We really wanted kids to feel like they were coming to this place to play and have fun and just, be in Minecraft, doing activities, playing in survival, playing, doing build battles, playing mini games, while also having these undercurrents of very specific grief programming. So as we've tried to look at evaluation, one of our bigger evaluation metrics might be engagement, right? How often are kids logging in? When they log in, how long are they staying? And when they're there, what are they doing? We have found some tension or some, we've started to maybe conflate a little bit. Well, if kids are logging in a ton, this space must be working. But if they're logging in a ton and they are not engaging with some of the offshoots that are a little more focused on grief or processing, and they're spending a lot of their time, if not all of their time, hanging out and playing mini games, we need to try to find a way where we're able to make clearer distinctions between, again, just like pure engagement and then obviously like types of engagement. And so this is one big tension point that we're still unraveling over time, but it's figuring out how the space can be both play forward, since Connected Camps, we know this is a very positive force for kids, especially kids who are going through things like grief, while also having specific lenses or specific activities or specific moments where kids are being asked to engage with their grief journeys, and we're able to make more, intentional observations about growth or about progress or maybe the lack thereof, and we need to revisit. So that's one of the tension points. The other one is sort of tied to this. It's a tension point where we have struggled to balance which metrics we want to focus on the most. I think this is probably true for everyone. There's like 1,000,001 different metrics we could look at. Initially, we were really just looking at how many kids are attending and how often are they attending. And we're trying to balance that against what we end up seeing more as interesting, which is what are the interesting or what's a better word than interesting? What are the very moving or important anecdotes that are sort of bubbling up from kids if we're just there to listen? And so these are not like discrete numbers, but a lot of the really powerful moments that we've had in this space are just short messages that a kid might send one of our moderators after the session ends, or an email we get from a parent expressing how much they appreciate the program, or one small build that a child made in the Memorial Garden, which is a space in the Minecraft world where they can build something in honor of their person. It's a really small build and it has a little signpost that just says me and dad, and they're fishing. These are harder to sort of pull together as points of data that you could maybe show in a spreadsheet or in a graph, compared to something like participation or pure just the number of signups, the number of enrollments, the amount of time spent on the server over every week. We're finding some tension there too, as we're beginning this much deeper evaluation process. We actually have the lovely Krithika here with us today in this meeting. She is supporting the project with doing ongoing research and evaluation. And it's just one of those things where I think many organizations struggle with this. We are struggling with it. And so I'm very excited to get feedback from everyone in here in our breakout room about this, but just balancing, right? Where do the anecdotes come in? Where is it important to prioritize like hard numbers? How important is participation? Like, does it matter more if there are 100 kids? Or does it matter more if there are 10 kids, but those 10 kids are extremely engaged and they're doing amazing things and seeing amazing growth? And so just some tension points there as well. I think that's probably my 5 minutes. So I'll pause there and see if I'm good. I don't know, Candace. I don't want to take us too long.
No, that's great. I'm going to open it up now. If people have questions, and as you're thinking about it, please drop it in the chat or just raise your hand. I just wanted to ask, Matthew, I see Mimi has her hand up, and I know Jess. Oh, you know what? I'm going to save my question. Lots of hands.
Oh,
So
boy.
Mimi, go ahead. Mimi, and then Jesse.
So I don't know if my question is just to Matthew, but also to the quantitative methodologists, and it might apply to Valerie as well. I think, Matthew, what you described about like kids are on the server, but they're doing different things. So then how do you make claims like when, and as a qualitative researcher, I'm like, well, that's what we do. We observe and, we look at the whole system. It's not about like making claims about the individual, but about the health of the system. And so as a qualitative person, what I look at is really different than like the NIH pyramid and all of those settings that make you accountable to like standardized individual outcomes. So I think my question is kind of, and sort of, maybe it's something that's better for discussion in the breakout rooms, but I just am wondering if some of like inherently within the Connected Wellbeing Initiative, most of the programs are foreground youth agency and choice. So by nature, it's very hard to control the nature of the intervention and the dosage, right? So it's going to be all over the place. And do environments like these, are they actually amenable to some of the more, health centered and quantitative evaluations, or should we be looking more towards other ways of telling the story and funders that are not like, is it even realistic to try to move up that pyramid that is required of health research, or without like, if we're going to actually honor the nature of the model?
I think that's a great question. I could take a stab at it, Mimi. Then part of the reason I put the pyramid was to say, this is a model, not the model to strive for. So it's well taken. The point is well taken that, we shouldn't be prioritizing evidence in all situations. It's really about alignment of goals. And I think what you're describing is like the health of the ecosystem and ways to get at that in ways that you can't quantify with a single level measurement of an individual. And part of that is just articulating that up front. And then I think you can have a mix of qualitative and quantitative measures of like a healthy system or a healthy society, right? But just being clear from the front. I think the way that our team has done it has been an individualized approach to assessment. So the question there is not whether or not a child is better than another child who didn't get in the program because they selected in, but if that child does better on days they're supported by their online community versus days where they don't have access. And there's selection and everything in that process, but we've tried to use each person as their own control and get a more idiosyncratic, capturing of whether this is working for them and when. But I'll pause and let others that have done this speak up too.
Yeah, I was gonna say something that's a little bit wonky, but I think touches a lot of what Candace is saying. I'm teaching our graduate methods course, and I was just talking to the students about the challenge with our research in that we often violate what we call the ceteris paribus clause, which is the idea that like all things are equal. And like we have this idea that like we assign people conditions and there's randomization, and see the only thing different about these groups is the intervention, when in fact we know that that's not at all true. Like there's lots of things different about these people, as Candace brought up. And so I think that some of the things that we need to be a little bit more open about in terms of our analysis is that there are differences that occur even within groups, even when there's randomization. And sometimes those differences are the things we're most interested in, or relate to our theory of change. And so I think like it requires us to measure some of those aspects that are part of our theory of change, or design methods like Candace mentioned, where people are used as their own control. In the implementation area where I work a lot, we do a lot of measurements of fidelity of things and then relate that to outcomes. Because the idea is like, well, if we give someone an intervention, it's not that they're assigned to that condition, but it's about like what parts of it do they receive, and then we can show dose effects or other things like that, or not show dose effects, and then it blows up our theory of change. But and I think, as you know, Mimi, qualitative work is like actually super important to like start to tease apart those differences. So I think it's a yes and, but I think the first thing we have to do is not lie to ourselves and say that like these things are all equal when it's not, and like use that to sort of better design models that allow us to evaluate like what's actually going on.
I'm going to pass on. Jesse, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think your project is really cool, and I think your comment about not knowing whether they're coming to the space, whether they're getting something out of it by just coming to the space and not interacting with the grief specific elements. It made me wonder whether there's any, and other people's comments are touching on this too, whether you have measurement of any other control aspects. Like for instance, do the kids have access to generic forms of Minecraft that are not your form of Minecraft? Sorry, I'm not using the right term, but like, and are you measuring that? Like, how likely are they to go to your form of Minecraft versus generic forms of Minecraft that don't have the grief specific thing? Because that could tell you something about preference for this. Or is there a control or comparison group? Because I'm thinking about what happens in group therapy, for instance, for kids who are experiencing grief or other types of issues. A lot of times kids come and don't engage very much in the therapeutic elements, but they keep coming. And I think it tells you there probably is something that they're getting out of being part of the community of people who have a shared experience that is valuable to them. And absorbing, listening, being around people who they know they can let their guard down might be therapeutic, even if they're not explicitly going back to the skills or engaging as other members are with the skills. Anyway, that was my thought.
No, super helpful. I think that is a lot of the time where we'll latch onto that because it's a very positive view on it where, like you're saying, if kids are coming back and they do enjoy this space and we have presented it as a space where we're normalizing grief and it's a community for you to be around other kids who are experiencing something similar to you, then surely there must be some huge positive, right? I think the due diligence that we have not done, which you're raising, which I know I saw Krithika, you're like taking notes like crazy, which I know you and I will talk about at length later, are things like, well, is this the only video game your caregiver is letting you play on a Friday night because they think it's beneficial? In which case, of course, you're going to come because you get to play Minecraft and normally you're not allowed to. Versus, do you have these other options of, well, there are 10 different Minecraft servers my friends are all playing on. Which one am I going to opt into? Oh, I opted into Experience Craft. Like maybe there's something there that we can sort of uncover. So there is some of this, like, I don't know, background knowledge, almost like control group or just due diligence around the types or profiles of campers that we have that I think would really help us uncover like the value that they may or may not be getting from the programming itself. So no, that's a very helpful question and comment. Yeah.
So I'm seeing more hands come up. So Jason and Krithik will take 2 quick questions and then we'll transition.
Yeah, I guess just my thought is also understanding a little bit about the context of what their grieving process has been like outside of that, and if they have other resources. And it kind of gets to my point in the comments, which I didn't mean to type publicly, but just if, where the students are coming from and what other resources they have available to them, and if they're able to process in other ways.
Yeah, it's super, super layered for the program. This is one of the huge topics of discussion that we have because we initially started by offering the program pretty exclusively to families who had attended Experience Camp. So it's a 1-week-long summer program that already assumes sort of a baseline of support for the youth in terms of their grief journey. Then we expanded it to also include verified partners. So Boys and Girls Clubs, other youth serving organizations, other grieving youth serving organizations, which already sort of open things up to broader demographics of, or I guess broader levels of support for grief. And the next big step for us is to open this platform up to anyone, just open enrollment with a short intake call, which will again really broaden the levels of pre-existing support for all of the youth and just makes it so much more. I could put a million different words after more, but it just makes it so much more, right? And so this is something we really need to be aware of and stay on top of, which is how are kids showing up into the space and how do we include that in our understanding of either the positive or negative outcomes that we're seeing and how we track them. So this is something we very much have top of mind because in the coming months, we will be opening the platform up, fingers crossed. And so this is going to be like a very, very obvious layer for us to be attentive to.
Krithika.
Thank you. I quickly just wanted to reflect to the question, Jesse, and the suggestion I think you brought up. Thanks, Matthew, for fielding the questions. I am taking notes. We have some evidence from how the kids speak with the counselors, you know, the near peer adults that are on the server in this space with kids. We know that some of the kids, these are like Minecraft enthusiasts and so good at the game that they play on other servers, but they play to play it. But when they come here, they describe the experiences, you know, some place that they really feel like they belong. I think we will in the next sort of phase try and in some ways be able to quantify that and maybe even get like quotes from kids. But we do have some insights into how these kids are in terms of like being, you know, they present themselves as being gamers. That's their identity, while they also know they have a shared identity as kids who are grieving. And I think there's something to say about how they keep coming back to the server, just, you know, how enthusiastic they are for every event that's planned. So we will be kind of, I think, watching out for those metrics that you're suggesting. Thank you for that.
That's great. I think we're getting a taste for how the conversation is going to go deeper. I wanted to flag that actually, Jesse, you're going to be in the breakout room, and Jesse, in addition to having a book out, has also done an Audible course on how to talk to children about death, which I think is an amazing resource. And so I think there's going to be a lot to talk about kind of in that breakout room, just in terms of the content, but also in terms of how to evaluate. So Remy, tell me if I'm doing this incorrectly. You're now the guru of all things breakout rooms. But at this point, we're going to split up into two rooms. Some people have been pre-assigned based on prior expertise, and other people are going to get to select which room that they go into. We're going to spend about 20 minutes in those rooms talking with the project leads and helping to kind of work through what could be possible next steps in terms of embedding a kind of an impact evaluation or working with existing data that they have in terms of helping them to achieve evidence goals, whether that's for internal improvement or external funders or recognition. So Remy, take us away into our rooms. Okay, well, I'm gonna pause there and thank everybody for joining us. It'll be very exciting to be able to see people in person in February. I want to thank the experts that are still on the call. I know that I don't think it's speaking out of turn to say that people would be very open to all of you reaching out after the fact and seeing where these conversations go. And so I encourage you to do that directly with the experts in the room. So thank you all for joining, and hopefully we can get to both impact and scale and do all the things, or at least do some of the things. So thanks, Mimi and Remy, for coordinating this.